Okay, we have been some comments on chat that I would like to read. Eva is telling us that I feel like how we feel and how surprised we. Oh, wait. This move. So I feel like how we feel and how surprised we are as has a lot to do with how much privilege we had before this started. For some, the fight is new. For others, it's just intensifying an ongoing fight. Um, Asil agrees, very important point. And finally, Lisa, I'm not impacted directly at all, definitely feeling clarity and connection with my impacted folks and some anxiety around that.
I want to thank you so
Okay,
much.
let's see if we have
Oh,
more starts.
okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing all these ideas and feelings, because for me, if we can talk about our emotions, then we can feel more connected, all this resonate with other people that might be feeling like us, or maybe we can listen to other experiences through our emotion.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I'll continue. I think one thing that was just to kind of shift uh what we want to work on today, and this is kind of the agenda is just to we've already done the objectives, flows, emotions. We're going to do some principles and values and then go to the scenarios. And I think what surprised me about not just my reaction, but those I was talking to was the emotions I felt by seeing other people's reactions, whether it was people like clinging on to the system or trying to, hustle their way, around this whole thing, or, uh, and just how people mobilize to like support folks to get jobs, and which I think is, it's always amazing. I wish we had the same effort and excitement about, helping asylum seekers or others get jobs. And so I think that was to me a little bit like enlightening, and in that those feelings were like more reactionary feelings, I think had to do with my own principles or values, right? So like whenever something is meeting our needs or not meeting our needs, we and like congruence in life and having grounding, or like having a like not living in cognitive dissonance is a need, right? Having clarity is a human need. And so I think what I personally have felt was, that this was needed for a long time, and that this has already been happening, and that this is something that has been in process. And so, I don't know if like excited is the right word, but I felt like this is a watershed moment. And so then when I saw, a lot of like people mourning it and really like sad about it, and I know there was a lot of things at risk, so we have to like kind of hold the complexity. But the fact that there was not any like openness to a new system, or even recognition that there is many other ways of doing global solidarity, I think was really about like my own principles feeling uh or values, right? Like feeling not connected. And so I wanted to pass it to Asil. We wanted before we kind of go to the scenarios. I wanted to play a video first that I got from Instagram, the good old Graham. And I really like this philosopher, economist. I don't know what his official title is, but he said something really interesting. And I think, I'll just play it, and then I'll talk about it. I hope I hope the sound is available, actually. So let's see.
Like it or not, economics has become a bit like Catholic theology in medieval Europe. It has basically become the language of the rulers. So if you don't speak economics, you cannot participate in any debate. Especially because in the last few decades of neoliberalism, we have been encouraged and sometimes even forced to think everything in economic terms. So when you're trying to protect a library or a museum, you have to make this economic argument, this will, I don't know, encourage learning and increase the people's intelligence and our productivity, Why should you do that, Unfortunately, that you have to. So increasingly, being able to speak economics is important. But then, of course, that they are not going to let you speak it, in the exact same way that the Vatican banned the translation of the Bible into local languages in the medieval times. So unless you belong to this priesthood of the kind of people who were trained in Latin, or unless you were from extremely privileged background and had a personal tutor to teach you Latin, you cannot even read the Bible. Yeah, and once that you create this body of knowledge which is not accessible to other people, then you can just kind of, well, basically bully other people into accepting your argument because other people cannot really understand you now.
That was all. That's all you get. That's all that was there. So, yeah, we're going to go over principles, and I just wanted to hear from you all, like how do you think this relates to the conversation of like designing the future and like how narrative or language is used and like what shifts? So I'll open up the mic and yeah, please share.
I'll go. This hits me. This resonates very well with me. Because I have this issue with how we talk about these kinds of things, and I remember writing about it and saying that we have to go back to the basics. Because when people are talking about development and they're talking about changing things, they're talking about innovating, or like innovation is just this problematic word now. They want to do things differently, or they want to do things big, or they come to a country like Haiti and they're like, oh, we're in this super rural town. They need internet, obviously, because how could they live without internet? And they bring internet to a bunch of kids in a rural area. It's bonkers. So now these kids cannot sustain a life in that context anymore, right? So then everybody starts to leave, and now we have a centralization problem, and it's all of these it's a butterfly effect, right? Because the way that development is talked about is exactly what this man is describing. It's done within a framework that is not. It doesn't fit every model, right? It doesn't fit everywhere. When people talk about, development in Haiti, they're talking about developing businesses. They're talking about developing like 5, 6 enterprises. That's not equitable. What sense does that make? So this makes perfect sense to me. This is exactly what I've observed throughout my entire career and what we're trying to dismantle in a country like Haiti. Like, we don't need a cement house with indoor plumbing and electricity. Some people don't even want that. They can build a cement house and they won't have bathrooms. Like, why would I invest in that? It's very expensive. Anyway, so it's little things like that. It's like, oh, we're fine with our thatched room homes. There's spaces like people, they make sense. I don't know if anybody follows that TikToker in, I think, Uganda. And she shows like tribal life. And she's like, this is why we use cow dung to like treat our floors. It's, it's sustainable. It's clean. It has the cleaning thing, I forget, I keep saying perspirant, but that's not the one. But anyway, so people are showing like we have simple lives, but that's what we want. Our aspiration is to meet our needs and maybe have a little extra to have a little pleasure. That's it. Like, nobody's trying to have a big house and 5 cars and whatever. That's not everybody's dreams. So anyway, so that makes sense to me.
Mm. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can, Monica, I really appreciated your honesty just then before you showed the clip and then the clip. And one of the things that I've been really feeling is tangled. I found myself making arguments for USAID, and parts of those arguments are things I actually haven't believed or agreed with for many years, and feeling like, well, this isn't how I wanted this to go down. So I just found myself, I'm sort of at acceptance now and trying to sift through all of that. But definitely the contradictions are in me, and I had to just kind of stop and realize that, like, you can't defend this with things that you actually don't even agree with, that you haven't agreed with. I'm actually not really, I'm adjacent to the sector now for reasons. And so I just felt very twisted up in that language. Like there was an article about how this was hurting American farmers, and that's a good argument on the one hand if you want to protect the status quo, and the food system program should have never worked that way. So then what? So that's, I mean, an example of like lots of different things that I found myself tangled up in.
So for me, thank you so much for sharing. We'll have a lot of time to share. I just wanted to, I think what I really liked, and I appreciate the comments, is in alluding to this idea of that the metrics we use, like say, okay, design something else, but use the same metrics, and with the same, which are like principle based, right? So quantitative, proof of concept reporting, this like very metrics based that are based on economic system, right? Are based on the three things that this administration in the United States has presented, which is American prosperity, stopping migration, and uh, the competition with China. So if those are our three metrics, and I saw quickly many peace building and development kind of just echo and parrot those talking points, and instead of us going down to like what are our principles, and so if we're going to use the same metrics, then we're all obviously it's not going to work, right? Because who cares about community assets or capital or cow dung, right? When we have bleach, or we have, when we, so in the metrics of that are used, then it's going to always fail. And so as we're like thinking of the new scenarios, I think what's important is also like framing and understanding like what are the metrics or what are the principles that we will use to measure this new world, right? It can't be the same ones. Um, and something to the effect, you can't like build with the same tool, the like the same weapons of the master's house, right? You can't like dismantle it. But the idea that like it's gonna be used, we're entering into a different mindset, and just like a different culture, just like a different context to design something. And so I wanted to kind of and Asil was gonna help us with this. We were gonna read some of these, and so the activity that we have, I'll present it as Asil if that's cool. Um, is we have these values, and they're also on the Activate Labs page that we've our principles, truths, I don't, you could call them, that we've been working with, and I'll go in more, and maybe we could take turns reading them out loud. And so the idea of what we wanted to do is be able to look at these, and then we have a set of 3 questions, and we were going to do like speed dating, rapid fire breakout rooms. So don't leave. It'll just be a minute and a half each one, and you're going to answer a specific question with each other and then come back. And I know it's traumatizing, and it's like there's like, again, I mentioned it last time, like the mass exodus after breakout rooms. Bye. But I promise it'll be really quick and painless, and we can do some trauma healing after if y'all are too traumatized by the breakout rooms. Um, but we'll just do random ones where you'll meet just one other person and just share, answer each question. But first, we wanted to kind of read them so that we're all like on the same page, and then kind of go into that to kind of be able to settle into what are the different the different principles that might build the world, and some of the ones might not be here, right? So some of the things we might need to add, or something else, and so please feel free to add that to your conversations and bring it into the main room. But I'll pass it to you, Asil, to if people want to read them out, or you read them, or whatever you want.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. It's just like we're bouncing off some of the values and principles that we think about in our own work, and kind of seeing how they resonate with people. So maybe it's easier if I read them. So first one is Sankofa, honoring the past to shape the future. We reach back to move forward, honoring our pain, history, memory, and ancestral wisdom to return to ourselves. Second one, curious empathy. Also this idea of like the urgent and the emergent, how transformation happens kind of in rough waters between the urgent and the emergent, cultivating the wadi or cultivating the valley, to so that the earth flourishes, and this idea of cultivating, um, uh, coming alive, this idea of coming alive, humility and patience being the threads that we trust, affirmative agency, the need for courage when we're thinking about justice, choosing solidarity, belonging, and holding every door open, plurality of perspectives, building a world that fits many worlds, the idea of the importance of intersectionality, and the idea that our power is in our intersectionalities, community, the importance of showing up like hope, especially when there's no hope, and interdependence. So these are some of the guiding values and principles that we think about and that guide our own work. Yeah, so we'll do some discussions in small groups, but I wanted to see if maybe very quickly people wanted to react to these. Which we can also do in small groups. Yeah, Monica?
Yeah, that'd probably be good. Let me see, where is the, okay. So there's 18, so I'm gonna do 9 breakout groups. And so the first question that we have is, which of these like are easier for you, or that you go to or resonate with you the most? And this is like just in your daily life. Which of these are the most useful to you, or and just if you want to just name one or a few, and you could just share. So it's just a minute and a half. So that means that each person will have only 60, what is that? 120, yeah, 60 seconds each to, not 60 seconds, sorry, half the time. Okay. So math is not my forte. Do not rely on me.
45 seconds. 45.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 45 seconds each. So it's just a quick share out. And so let's, we'll put it at 2 minutes. You'll have a minute each. And we'll go to it now. Uh, a seal. Mm, okay. Hi, Lisa. We're in.
Hi, I was feeling lonely.
Oh, were you alone? Oh no.
Yeah,
Okay.
no
Let me,
problem.
okay. Let me, sorry about that. Where, oh
Oh,
no. Okay.
don't
We could just
worry.
share here. Don't
Yeah,
worry. Yeah, let's share here.
I love them all. They're so beautiful.
Yeah. Which one like is something that you go to?
No such thing as justice without courage. I really love that one.
Mm-hmm. I know so many people that I would say are moral and ethical, but when it comes time to like stand up for others, they're very quiet, or they kind of take the high ground.
It's
And
hard.
and it's like, okay, but I needed you.
Which
Yeah.
one's your favorite?
Yeah. For me, I mean, what I always kind of I think I cling to is like the affirmative agency, and the idea that we all have agency, and like how do we affirm it in others and how do we shine that in others, I think is like so important. And that's, I guess, what like triggers me um the most when that's not happening, right? Okay, because I'm managing this thing too. Let me get the next one going. Next. Okay, start over. And hopefully you get into a group this time. Let me admit somebody, so that'll increase it. Start over. And then we'll do 9. Or we'll do 8. And so maybe some people are going to have more people. Okay.
So sorry, I had to step out. What's the group doing at this stage?
Oh, no, no problem. So we're just doing quick breakout rooms and we're going to be doing we're going to launch the next one in 30 seconds. So let me um see if yeah, I kind of launched it and then people um yeah, I can't like give anybody. Oh, I guess I could write people here. Let me they're going to come back. They're either going to come back or you're going to be placed in another group. And so we're going to go. The next question is, which should be a lot shorter. I'm having trouble with this thing because I didn't realize it was a minute to get people out of the room. Um, but what is the one that is more difficult for you? That's more of a challenge that is not a natural thing to go to.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello, all. So the next question that you should be going into a room soon, but I'll write it in the broadcast too. The next question is which of these are more challenging or something that's not a natural for you? That is a challenge for you. And you can go to the room. I think there's it should be. I think Asil, do you see your rooms? You and Brian have a room. And then Ricardo, oh my goodness, let me move you to room 5.
Else with me.
Yeah, no, I'm moving people right now.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Assign to room 2.
Are we in the breakout rooms already? I didn't
Yeah,
see any.
yeah, there's
Anyone?
yep, people are waiting for you to go there.
Oh, I don't know how to go. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you had it? Okay.
Yeah, I also am not seeing a link to join the breakout
Okay.
room.
Mhm.
I'm
You
seeing the
are-
Canva.
Okay. I see you in room here. I'm not sure what to do here. Okay, I'm gonna take everybody out in a minute and then we'll just start again. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I try to do the next session right away, but it didn't work. Okay, sorry about that. Some people didn't see what room they're in, so we're gonna just start again from scratch for the next one. And apologize. It's Beth, are you in Panama right now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah. How wonderful. That sounds warm.
It is
Snowing
warm,
again.
lovely.
Snowing again here. It's like we can't get away.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay, I feel bad for breaking up the rooms here. We'll combine the second and third question so that we're not getting all these technical difficulties
Are
here.
there some people in their groups, or is this
Yeah,
all
they
of
are.
us?
They're coming back.
Oh, okay.
I messed it up. Sorry. Yeah, no. Okay.
Did you mention these values are on your webpage, right? Because I'm on a cell phone and I can't really look at them, so I'm gonna look for them.
Let me see if I could just text them to you too.
I think if they're
Yeah, they're not all of them are, but let me just take a screenshot and I'll text them to you, okay?
think
So it's easier, not one by one. Okay. So sorry about that. So Asil, do you wanna ask like we could do the second and third question? You're like, no, I don't want anything to do with this mess.
No, no. No. Okay, we can do both questions, and I'll also we'll post them on the chat. So the two questions are, which principles, values is an area of growth for you and why? So that's the second question. The third question is, which principle, value, if you had to choose, is the most important in building global solidarity and why?
Okay. So can I make the breakout rooms now?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right. I will open all rooms. I'm not sure what's going on here, but yeah, okay. They're open now. People should get this link now, I hope.
Can you put the link to the Canva again?
Yes, they will do that right now.
Awesome.
Let me just give me one quick second.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Were you alone again?
Yes, I was alone.
Oh, don't tell me that. What am I doing wrong here? Okay.
But I did some thinking on my own, so that's good too.
Okay. Yeah, share if you want to share.
Now I was just thinking about the justice without courage. I
Mm,
think that's a really big one at the moment because I'm surrounded by people with fear and I'm one of them.
mm. Yeah. For me, yeah, I really like that one a lot. I really believe that our power is at our intersections for this, kind of new world. And I think we need to like figure out where our powers are or where our strengths are. And I don't like this like stay in your lane because we're all learners and we're all teachers, but to come with humility. So I would say that our powers and intersections, but at the same time, like humility and this one, humility and patience are the threads that weave trust. That, to enter into the space with humility and patience, I think is like so vital because it's just like in the very intangibles that we stop working together or stop feeling like the trust. Um, and then that breaks down a lot of things. So yeah, for me, that's really
Yeah.
the 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 crux. And at the core, it's like I also am like looking at cultivating the wadi, like the idea of a dry place that is not yet, and I'll share this in the bigger group, is not yet, just looks like dry desert. And I'm from Romania, but we lived in California most of my life, and we have a lot of like dry desert places. And then when the rains come, then it like flowers come and you wonder like who took care of this place? Like who planted this? Who did this? And it just the ecosystem was in place for that. So it's like, how are we creating an ecosystem where we're able to have flourishing? And maybe now we don't see it, and I'll add more later, but I think like that to me is really important also. What's more difficult for me, I guess, was the other question. As people come back, I'll share. Uh,
You cut us off, Monica. Oh my goodness.
oh my God. Well, you'll have time. See, now everybody's like best friends. Okay. Well, we're gonna besties. Well, we're gonna share here now if people uh definitely I want to hear if you were in the middle of something and you want to share with the big group, that'd be great. Um, did you want to share something, Asil, or?
Sure, I can start. I think one that really that we kind of looked at was hope and like um, showing up as hope. Sorry, showing up as hope is one that I think it's like it's kind of, it's a provocative idea. I think there's people that have strength and are able to like, um, bring hope moments where hope doesn't exist. And other people, for example, like me, just really are just sharing that I struggle with showing up as hope. And if I was sharing this like German word, I hope you can share it if I'm the group that kind of encapsulates this idea of showing up as hope.
Yeah. Who else wants to share what was it could be either what was challenging, what was like something they really resonate with, or the third question of like what do we need most?
Maybe I can just quickly explain what Zweckoptimismus is. So it's the optimism that doesn't come from the data giving you hope or from feeling optimism in your heart, but in a very German way, it's the optimism that you choose because you will achieve more results that you like if you act as if you're optimistic. So it's a very German cultural value. I've lived outside of Germany for 20 years, and in this situation, I realized how German I am.
Mm. So it's kind of like fake it till you make it, but in a positive way, like get your body. Often it's like an embodied practice of getting your body ready for that, right? For that positive expectation, as opposed to waiting for those emotions to hit. I like that, yeah. Isabella, do you have something in your group or?
Sure. We were just talking about like intersectionality and interconnectedness. And I think for me, just everything is connected and everything depends on each other. I was just trying to have a conversation about somebody was trying to talk about a business model, and I was like, the only way I will work with you is if I package your opportunity like an investment to you and how it will value other businesses and other situations. I was like, that's the only way we'll do it. So it was just showing this interdependence. Like, yeah, you want to work with farmers, cool. Somebody's got to buy the product, somebody's got to eat it, somebody's got to like be okay doing that. And I think it's really important right now, especially when we look at what comes next, and is this concept of interconnectedness and interdependence is really, really important because I think it'll shift how we perceive not just what we bring to the table as individuals, as organizations, as communities, but I think it's also going to be the way we reshape how we perceive our power, our strength, like our assets, like what resources do we have available to us. And I think that's going to be really, really important coming forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's Beth or Sharon or Catherine. Yes, it's Beth. Yeah.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you to everyone who's shared. I want to say that, solidarity is what really resonates for me because we're definitely, if not before, definitely at the time where we need to build power. And I think that a key piece of that is going to be developing conflict transformation skills, because conflict is a part of building solidarity. And like, how do we welcome it in generative ways, so that we can be stronger together? And something came up in our conversation about like shifting kind of the north-south model of aid, and how do we really begin to listen to the folks in the global south about what is priority for them? And I think for folks, particularly in the US, in proximity to power and resources, I think that listening to Black and Indigenous people in the US in particular is the place to start, because they are speaking about and providing the way of how American imperialism shows up at home and harms people at home, that I think Americans can learn a lot from before going off to fix other countries. It's like, let's deal with what's happening in the US with Black and Indigenous people there, and that will give us a guide about how do we really start in solidarity with the global South, having dealt with what we need to deal with at home.
Thank you so much. Yesterday we were driving back from New York, me and my son, and we were listening to Pod Save the World, which, and they were just talking about Trump's, comments about taking over Gaza, and the guys, let's just call them neoliberal. They were work for the Obama, whatever. They just have a pretty generic, and they were like, who did, like, where do you get this idea from? What does he think? Like, just like take over Gaza. And my son kept going like, us, this country. This is like, what are you talking about? Like, he just kept like, what are you guys surprised about? Like, and before that, England and France. And so it's like just the forgetfulness. And that's where, like, for me, the Sankofa too it always resonates with me. It's like going to the past to kind of go forward. And if we don't go back to that idea of like what we did, who we are, the good and the bad, to learn from it, then we're just going to keep, which is from Indigenous Black, people that have already walked this path and have been saying the same thing for so long. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's like the blindness is crazy. Anyone else want to have something they want to share about this?
I want to read out Liliana's thoughts, because also Liliana was not in a group, was in a group alone, unfortunately. So just give some space, some platform for Liliana. So on principles, values.
I won't get any awards for being a back-end facilitator. So give those up.
So on principles and the areas of growth for you, Liliana talked about belonging, saying sometimes I feel like the rest of the world do not really see Brazilians and Brazil as we really see ourselves as part of a bigger net. Sometimes I feel hard contributing more as we are not seen as belonging to a strong group of interest in the global scenery. Like Brazilians have much to contribute, but not always have the space, and for not always have the space. Principles that are most important to build global solidarity, interdependence, as we have in our DNA, the ancestry knowledge that understand us as part of the global web, even if not feels like politically. Regarding the natural concept of it, our cultures drive us to understand that everything is interconnected, in fact. Yeah.
Thank you. So as we kind of move to the scenarios, what I wanted to, does anybody else want to share? Sorry, thank you so much for sharing the chats. I want to make sure that people get a chance to kind of share what came up for them or what surprised them. Even on this call, we're doing some piece design processes, but it just to even name the fact of like the time when this is held is, not accessible to everybody, right? In Asia, parts of Africa and Australia, right? It's like 2 a.m. So like even as Liliana was mentioning, the accessibility or being heard, it's just even like the structure and one I might add to this, make something for it, is like structure channels power, right? And so even the structure, like if this was the, main call for the future, design the future, the time would be, is really important to when people have access to being able to contribute. And sometimes I think in the system that we've had, that it's even just the structure of consulting or hearing people. And what's kind of shifting is people's voice are getting louder, and maybe with allies and different groups and different more of this narrative taking on. But I just wanted to lift up this idea of like our principles, the ones like we hold and we live through, are like grounded in like mediated narratives and like stories we tell. So one that came up for me that was really resonated with me, I don't know if you feel the same, but was this idea of risk, right? So the narrative goes in current, in the status quo and what we had before, that we have to use intermediaries, NGOs, legal entities to curb risk, right? To transfer money, to partner with people. First, social movements, community groups, they might not be organized in the same way. They might not have legal status. They might not have a representation online. They might not speak English. They might not know how to do reports, how to write a RFP, response for proposals. And so the philosopher Hansun said before, it's like the rules were set up, the narrative set up, and then those that can follow those are less risk. But now what we're hearing, what we see, and we've heard this and seen it and known it for a long time, but let's just say that's kind of becoming more of the zeitgeist, that the way aid was going is also a risk. That what is at risk is the lack of agency, autonomy, self-determination, ability to control your own world. The risk of communities, being under, CIA or under the state when they receive this funding. The risk of, we've seen even, vaccinations or things being used to harm, or forced, what's the word that women can't have children? Where they,
Sterilizations.
thank you, or sterilization, right? Thank you. Sorry, my brain is still waking up here. And so like those are risks also. And so to act as if this one is risk and this is riskless is a narrative that we're hearing, that we've heard for so long, because we didn't take community self-determination or people's self-determination to develop themselves as a metric in any kind of way of measuring that's an important thing. And so, well, maybe, or even corruption, right? When money is dispersed locally, people know who's a scam artist. People know who's a fake organization. People know who's actually using polarized language because they know the community. They know what's going on. So that's a risk too. You could fund people that are frauds actually when you don't know the context. Um, and there's plenty of fraud going on. So I think that that narrative of like how risk is taken. So it's like all of these are based on a lot of the current values that hold the current system are based on certain values. And we can name some of them, right? We could name, you know, uh, transparency or risk or due diligence or process. And a lot of these are all about, you know, this yesterday I was on a call and they said something about cold money and warm money, right? So cold money from a funder that is like rigid and strict and you need to do this. And warm money, let's say from remittances or community foundation, you know, that are a lot more flexible with design, a lot more like function. And it's really about the value systems behind the distributor of that money or how that money is distributed or how that aid or how that solidarity is distributed. I don't want to leave it just to money, but I mean, the federal freeze was a financial shift, right? So I want to stay on that. But so as we move into these scenarios, which I think will help us, we want to think about the different uh, values that are going to even like frame what kind of world. So we're going to start on this today, but of course we're going to this is a big effort. And so what we wanted to do is get into groups of four, but also because of the time, we can just talk about it here and maybe talk about just kind of introduce them and have a discussion before we like really dig deep. We'll hop into this next week much deeper. So on the let's say this is power structure. Uh if you scroll down here, so this is four different scenarios. So one is on power structure and how, you know, power is transmitted and structured, and this is the type of funding. So and so this is going to be, sorry, let's do this. Yeah. So it does somebody want to read scenario 1 for us and then somebody else scenario 2, 3, 4. You could just unmute and read it as you wish, whether you're on camera or not.
Sure. Scenario 1, decentralized power and alternative funding. Movements and grassroots-led funding thrive.
Yeah.
Scenario 2, centralized power and alternative funding. Wealthy philanthropists fund initiatives, but power remains with elite institutions.
Scenario 3 is decentralized power and traditional funding. Communities lead, but are still dependent on the old structures or old sources of funds.
Mm-hmm. And 4?
Scenario 4, centralized power and traditional funding aid system returns or is replaced by a new equally top-down institution.
Okay. So let's ask some questions. So in these 4 scenarios, like we could see who's holding the power. We have some questions down here. We could notice. So I guess my first question is, in each of these scenarios, does the way what it in your opinion makes the biggest change? Alternative funding, traditional funding, or power centralization? Which of those two? Is it power or the funding mechanism are the most would make the biggest shift for you? Ricardo, do you want to talk?
Not sure I've understood, but I'm all for scenario 1.
Okay, so the question.
That's what I try to do with the shelters I work with.
Okay, so the scenario one resonates with you most. What of if we had to choose, so for you it's like decentralized power is the most important and alternative funding models. Okay. Scenario, what about, so my question about which of these would be the most, Catherine, did you want to share?
I guess I would say that when I think about power is the most important, whereas agency, the sources of funds would hopefully follow, that having power means the sources of funds, whatever they are, follow the power. And for me, the difference between alternative funding and traditional funding is sort of scale. Although I know people have mentioned before remittances, which is obviously a massive source of funding, but harnessing that and is the one way that we could equal the amount of money flowing from, example, USAID.
Hmm.
I don't know what to think about scale. I don't want to give up on the scale of funding available from the US, whether that's distributed as reparations or as aid to Global South led, community led initiatives.
I think, I mean, you mentioning, and this is a kind of a side one, I could write it in the questions, but just I wanted to hear reflections on this. But I did, if anyone has a thought about reparations, because I have heard from different opinions from Black and Indigenous group, about like that framing this as reparations or not. And so I know, I don't know if Miranda's still on, but I know you had something to add to that, and yeah, I would love to hear that too. But yeah, how are you taking in this, and like what's, is there a scenario that's not here? Um, yeah, please share.
I can
That's
I can
yeah,
chime in if
yeah.
that's okay. I think decentralized power is the most important one, mostly because, like what I think Itzy said, she struggled with the focus on funding. And I think if you end up in a system of decentralized power, the need for funding will actually be less. Just because decentralized power will mean that people will be able to define their own problem. My big thing is that he who defines the problem owns the solution. So if you're in a model of decentralized power, people are able to articulate their challenge and their need in a very different way that will actually reduce the scale of projects of development. That's how I perceive the that sort of question. If you're touching on reparations, I think I'm on both sides of like development is reparations in all its forms. But I think I don't know, this is a slippery slope down a rabbit hole for me. I have so many things about reparations. But to sort of keep it on topic for you, I think the decentralized power I think becomes fundamental. I think that's definitely the first step. Because it will organically create alternative funding, but I'm very like realistic in terms of like what's possible now and then what's next and then what's next. But I feel like that would be the same thing because changing the funding mechanisms right now, it is so daunting. But decentralized power is something you take in a lot of ways, right? People will like right now people are mobilizing around, all right, well, what do we have? Like, what can we do with what we have? And I think that's really, really important to really to reaching a decentralized power model.
Thank you. Somebody else want to add?
I can build on that. I think what I'm sitting with is a question about what's most likely, which is not the dream state, but is just a little bit more of the tapping into realism, I guess. And I think we get to scenario one pretty much well, I don't want to say only, but it feels like we get to scenario one only if we're able to dismantle globalized capitalism. And so therefore I think scenarios 2 and 3 are the most likely shift, if there's going to be any shift in the future. And it would be, hopefully in the path to get to scenario 1. But it's hard for me to hold out hope of that big of a jump. So it's hard for me to be in that radical dream space, I guess, with my realism in tow.
I mean, when I saw scenario 3, I was like, "Oh, this is localization." That was the idea. And so what we also like, I think there's a few things that this diagram doesn't, like, if we're like imagining this kind of with any kind of design, we have to put constraints, and the peace design is not different. But like a lot of the countries that we are that are receiving, let's say, aid, or that are recipients, have a big debt with World Bank and with IMF, right? And so then the development is very, and under really, questionable contracts and ways that they were like are charged. And so there are other, like, what's missing. There's, like, if the debt was removed, is that going to help regular people to develop, right? If because this is kind of still imagining things within the same construct of like recipient and donor, right? So it's not changing the whole thing. This is kind of just like saying, if we still have people that need money and we still have people that give money, what do we do? But I think, this is not expansive in the idea of like, can we chop off, the big debt? Can we do this? Can we do that? And so I want to even open it up to like what's missing. I think the constraints help us kind of see. Yeah, it's Beth, yeah.
I would say, I just really struggle. I'm just going to be honest. I'm like super radical, meaning returning to the roots. In terms of, when I do my Sankofa work, I go way back. And when we talk about these institutions like the World Bank and the IFC holding debt for countries, like, who owes who what, right? Like, are we looking at everything that has been extracted from the majority of our countries? And how we looked at how the wealth that is being then sent as aid, how was that wealth generated? With whose labor and whose land? And are we going back enough? Are we doing the work of Sankofa thoroughly enough to look at the systems within the relevance that they require? Which, to me, if we're talking about, owing money to the World Bank, are we holding the realities of where did those resources come from in the first place? And are we engaging with it, accepting what the, colonizers have dictated are the economic realities of the world? Or are we going to begin to challenge all of that and bring the truths that go much deeper than like who owes what to whom and who's the funder and who's the recipient and what is owed? So going back to the conversation on reparations, I think people have a knee-jerk reaction to reparations because it requires a shifting of power of resources that most privileged folks are not willing to even entertain. And that, if we begin the conversation with what is owed to whom, I think that, and like what repair is necessary, I think maintaining that conversation about repair strictly within money and funding does a disservice to the damage that has been done and the kind of healing that is required in our communities for us to begin to really have the agency and self-determination to dictate what does repair mean for each of us, for each of our communities. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody want to respond to that or add? So Lisa applauding. Do you have more to add to or something you want to bring in? Well, I mean, I'll respond. I think that like having feasibility, which again, for me, that's like a risk conversation. What's feasible is like kind of what we're willing to take a risk on, or what we invest in, or what we value. Um, uh, that's one kind of versus like a new measuring system. So I'm like, is it like a truth and reconciliation commission on debt that needs to happen first, on the scale, like on measuring what colonialism and what current extraction of what's going on in Congo now, um, and the measuring that before even having this conversation, is that something that is like, I don't know, feasible, but what would be like one way to even move to action around that, or what are some of, ways that we could even, how is that how far back? I mean, I really love that provocation. Which could take time, right? And so then like there's this gap, but yeah, what is, what is like a tangible way to do that?
I'll just offer again, sorry, if anybody else wants to jump in, please do, I've been thinking a lot about this question. And I've been reading and learning mostly from Black and Indigenous leaders that have been doing this for generations. And what I'm hearing is that we gotta mourn the realizations of where we find ourselves. We gotta take the time to feel our feelings. That's the beginning. We don't begin to heal until we allow ourselves to feel how harmful these systems have been and the impact on each of us, regardless of our backgrounds. And that impact hasn't been equally spread throughout communities, right? Understanding that there are communities that have been way more impacted. I come from a context of the Americas, all of the Americas, Turtle Island and Abya Yala. And to me, Black and Indigenous people are the wisdom holders that we need to be in community with and engaging with and honoring their wisdom and doing our own micro reparations, right? As we're accessing this wisdom, how do we honor that? And maybe if I live in DC and I'm in community with the Piscataway Conoy people, and I begin to pay them reparations, and part of my rent becomes not just paying my colonizer landholder, but the original owners of the land, right? But that requires a level of feeling our feelings, mourning everything that has been lost, and then that healing process will begin to bring the transformation that will have each of us begin to divest from the system through our personal choices that allow us to show up in different ways. If we're not practicing this as individuals and in our own little pockets of communities, it's impossible at the macro level. Like Adrienne Marie Brown says, small is all, right? Like we got to start somewhere. And then eventually it may or may not grow. We don't know, but we need to practice what we know is best to do, guided by healed and transformed hearts, rather than a place of harm and violence that we all in the cycle of. And I'd love to hear other views.
Yeah, I wanted to see if sorry, I see Isela, please share, and then I will read some of the comments on the chat. Isabella?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, obviously, if anybody who hasn't spoken can go, cut me off, no problem. But no, I think this becomes such an interesting concept for me, coming from Haiti, from the Caribbean, and from this region, So I actually have a background in transitional justice, and I've done a lot of work in that space. And so we had a regional meeting last year for the LATAM region, talking about what transitional justice looks like, and we talked about reparations. And I think you said tangibly what can happen, and I think a couple of the things that are happening are indigenous communities. There are two things that are happening. One, they are claiming crimes against nature, which is becoming a very interesting transitional justice mechanism where they talk about nature as an entity. And so crimes against nature plays into the fact, and it becomes interesting. There are also indigenous communities in Latin America that are playing the system. It's actually it's incredible. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the offset models. And so there's an indigenous community that used an offset model for a land developer that is extractive and problematic and blah, blah, blah. And they gave them all the fields. And by doing that, they were able to essentially purchase their land, and now they can sustainably manage their land, and it's incredible. And so I think there are things that are happening, and I think for this region there is a Black reparations movement that is sort of building a little bit. Like the CARICOM has a Black reparations. Let's just say space of thinking. I don't know how many people are in it, but it exists. And then there's these sort of like Afro communities in Latin America, in Brazil and Colombia in particular, that are having a lot of these conversations about what that looks like. And I think when I engaged with them, one of the things we were talking about is the international mechanisms that exist to hold accountable these spaces. Obviously, they're not doing anything, right? And so what we were talking about is, what does it look like to have a movement against not just an industry, like the extractive industry is really hard to tackle, right? There's a lot of dangers associated to that. But, you know, if we look at historically the abuses of private corporations in the region, there are opportunities, you know, like there was a movement against the company Nestle for essentially like selling products in favelas and marginalized communities in Brazil that created all kinds of like conditions that people didn't have before, like diabetes and obesity and all of these things. So there was a legal action taken, and then there's all of these other things where you know, like I look at Haiti, and there, I'm pretty sure it was Michelin, but there was a U.S. tire company that took extractive contracts here so they could have land to unsustainably harvest precious woods and rubber trees, and so they did publicly. But if I tell you the number of massacres that are associated to clearing that land, you know, there's reparations from corporations as well, because going for governments is really, really hard. And we just get lost in the politics. But is there an opportunity to look at like a private sector thing, like, oh, I'm going to go for Michelin, or we used to make baseballs in Haiti, same thing, massacres. So anyway, so those are the conversations that I've been hearing as a tangible sort of reparations concept.
Mm-hmm. That's, yeah, I think I took some notes, and I think it's like really interesting, because when we look at I'm looking at the notes now, and I the comments, and I see that like Beth also said, I struggle with I do too, because that's such a limited conversation, and it's like assuming so many things, and it's already like, again, structure channels power, so it's like putting things in that box. It's like, okay, how can we get money to people? That's the only goal, rather than looking at like, what have you taken from me? But I think that what's really an interesting is when we look at like the stakeholders, right? That philanthropy and corporations are some of the donors, right? So they're like taking from this hand and giving with the other hand, right? Like in the same day, like the CRS does. I have a friend that she was an engineer for Shell, and she left. She's from El Salvador, like as a protest. I mean, she was making tons of money. She was, you know, working in the oil. She left as a protest because of the harms that were happening, like real harms that she was seeing every day, that she just could not live with herself. And then I have another person I know that was running the CRS for Shell. And so, you know, in my little world, like these two people were like on two sides of this thing. And, you know, frankly, he didn't have a lot of qualms with the social impact, right? But the person that was seeing, you know, where that money was taken from to give to somebody else did. So I think it's like this, that there is like even an ecosystem in the funding, and we don't have to even mention the Rockefellers, and, you know, like where, you know, how a lot of this generational wealth that philanthropy has got from was from exploitation and extraction of, on Black and brown bodies, really, historically in the United States. But then not to mention so many, like you said, Nestle or minerals, and so in Africa or in other places. So I think that's interesting to kind of even go farther back, which I think, I'm always like looking at I don't want to say pragmatic, like what is how can we get this from like philosophy to like an action that somebody can, take, and so I really appreciate like Isabella's points of like real concrete ways that this is happening and claiming crimes against nature and quantifying it and putting a number to it and saying, this is what you owe us. Actually, we don't owe you, you owe us this. Um, and doing that math, and again, like speaking the language of the Vatican, of this highbrow language, to get what has been taken. And so I don't know if Alan, if I could just read a little bit, and then we want to close it up as time has gone. But so the three other scenarios depend on institutions outside of communities making decisions and taking action. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I wonder if we know what realistic feel like. A part of me wants to think about whether things are realistic or not. And I want to lean into is what I want to lean into. It's the same construct. If we don't, shouldn't we call for what we actually want to see? Yeah. Um, so yeah, thanks everybody. Jumping in action without taking, yes, no, and I like, just to finish, and I was like, oh, after what you said, Beth, would have been like a great even closing, because I think the idea of us, you know, a national mourning for the loss, where like the constant flow has ended. So now, like, let's see how we can sit in this. And I think what would be an interesting question of how people can shift from trying to save the system, one, to centering themselves in this, and then holding space or allowing for that mourning so that creativity can return, where like design can actually happen, right? Because like trauma is where creativity ends. When we have trauma and we're like agitated and in a high level of activation, we're not able to think clearly and calmly. And so, how are people going to design their future without that healing? And so I think those are questions I'm like would love to leave off. What we've done is we've closed off this kind of the hive, and then stay like another 30 minutes. Well, I'll stay. You can all go if you want, no problem. But if it's we're just people unmute and just have more of a flowing conversation where we take off the record, and just kind of, if people still have things that they want to ruminate and think about, that it's not like part of that process necessarily. It's more of the dialogue and just like what else, how can we grow it? Because I have a lot of questions, but I want to be more in dialogue rather than, in a presenter mode. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Well, we're gonna get back to these, and I think we have a lot of questions, and I want to even like, and if you have a model or think about like a different structure, it's always, I like matrices and frameworks, because they kind of help us kind of put different values against each other. But I want to think about this of like how we, and I have one quadrant that might be useful to kind of think about like the harm that was happening and then how we deal with the past before we move to reconstruction or rebuilding. And that's like an important aspect of, what's next. You can't do that until you actually repair some harm. And I would say in this country, in the United States, and in many countries, that hasn't even been discussed, right? Like that's not even a conversation. It's just straight to like nation building, development, straight to, I mean, look, in Gaza, we're already developing condos, you know, in Trump's mind. And so, it's just like jumping over to like erasing the harm instead of actually seeing what, from people that have been victims or survivors, what they see as the future. And so I think those are really important. And so I'm like, are these quadrants even useful? But thank you so much. I'm really grateful. And I'll stop the share, and I'll also stop the recording. And and you're free to go. And then for those that want to stay, they can stay as they wish also.